All right, guys, before you start our lesson, which is going to begin with a warm-up, and it's going to practice solving for angles, diagonals, side lengths of parallelograms, rhombuses, rectangles, and squares. I want to first revisit these properties that we talked about last lesson. And this sheet right here, which can be found on page 46. So go find page 46, please. Scroll all the way down. It's like one of the last pages before your Unit 8 test study guide. We have not talked about kites, trapezoids, and isosceles trapezoids, but we will right before break, starting next week. But for now, we're going to focus on all of these quadrilaterals on the right. And what we're going to do, instead of listing all the properties, because that's already done for you, right here, here, and here, we're going to go ahead and mark them on our figure, and you're going to be able to use this sheet on your test. So please make sure you're following along. Pause the video if you need to. These markings should make sense. You should see these before. You've seen them all year. And I'm going to color code them so you can follow along with me, okay? Opposite sides being parallel is our definition of a parallelogram. This would be our markings for opposite sides being parallel. Put those in blue. Showing that opposite sides are congruent would be the same number of tick marks on each side. So if I put 1 over here and 2 over here, that means opposite sides are also congruent. Opposite angles being congruent would need the same number of arcs in each corner, right? So these two angles are congruent, and these two angles are congruent. Consecutive angles. Consecutive angles are the angles that are right next to each other, and they're supplementary. So what we're going to do to show that is we're going to say this angle here is x, which means the angle right next to it would be 180 minus x. You can also put this one as 180 minus x. Either one of them that are right next to each other, either one of those angles is going to be supplementary. And then finally, diagonals bisect each other. Remember, a diagonal is a segment that goes from one vertex to the opposite vertex. And if these are bisecting each other, that would mean these two are congruent and these two are congruent, splitting each other in half. Okay, it's a little better. Great. Hopefully we remember all of these markings. We've used them plenty of times this year. Okay, there's a reason rhombuses and rectangles are right underneath parallelograms. That's because they have all of these same 5 properties. But we're not going to put those 5 properties on here. We'll have way too many markings going on. It'll look way more complicated than this. So we're just going to keep in mind it has all of the above properties, rectangles and rhombuses, in addition to these 3 and these 2. So for rhombuses, 4 congruent sides, 1, 2, 3, 4. Diagonals are perpendicular. So if our diagonals are perpendicular, that means they meet at a 90-degree angle. And then finally, diagonals bisect opposite angles. If diagonals bisect opposite angles, that means these 2 angles are congruent to these 2 angles. They bisect a pair of opposite angles. And these 2 angles are congruent to these 2 angles. Okay, our 3 additional properties of a rhombus, including the 5 properties of a parallelogram. Only 2 for a rectangle. Those 2 would be full right angles, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and 90 degrees. Awesome. And then the last one involves the diagonals, which in this case, diagonals are congruent. So if I draw one segment here, one diagonal here and one diagonal here, now instead of saying these 2 are congruent and these 2 are congruent, they're actually all congruent. So you just need to put the same number of tick marks on all of them. That means the entire segment is congruent to the other segment. entire diagonal is congruent. Okay, and then last but not least is our favorite. A square has every single property listed above, every single property of a rectangle, rhombus, and a parallelogram. So we're not going to draw any of those on there. Just keep in mind what this states right here. All properties of parallelograms, rectangles, and rhombi. Okay? All right, use this sheet on the warm-up you're about to do and turn in class. Okay, all of your properties are listed right here. Use the homework that you just had some practice on. And then if you have any questions, I will answer them next week. Good luck on the warm-up and hopefully the lesson. It's short, it's just plotting some points and deciding what quadrilateral you have. Hopefully it's not too difficult, but I'll answer any questions you guys have next week. Good luck.